Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to Story Time. Gonna tell you guys a little story tonight. Gonna call it The Spin. Maybe that's what I'll call this story. Years ago, me and my father, my father worked at a place called Browning Ferris Industries. And he was getting older. He was the oldest guy there at that point in time, He was still working age though, and he was still working. And they owed him some money, back pay. They owed him from the company he was working for. And they said, listen, we got this old industrial loader here. Somebody left water in the engine in the wintertime, and they ruined the engine. They said to my dad, they said, if you want, they said, we'll give you that tractor in lieu of your pay. And they said, I think it was like $1,000 they charged him for the old industrial loader. So my dad accepted the deal, and he said, okay. He said, deliver it out for me and to my house, and I'll take the trade. So he took the tractor. It was a big blue tractor. It had a front-end loader on the front end of it, and, of course, a messed-up engine. So me and my dad got working on the thing, and we checked it all out. We found that all of the either the pistons were cracked from the water that was in the engine, or just about everything was cracked inside the engine because they had left just water in it instead of antifreeze. And of course, it's a cold environment up here in Canada, so the engine was totally messed up. So my dad went on the internet and he was hunting around for engines. And this tractor was an old tractor. I think it was like from the 1950s or something. Couldn't find an engine. But a guy told him at work, he said, listen, he said, the 305 Chevy engine, V8, will fit right in, and it's got the exact same clutch, he said, and the exact same spline that fits on this tractor, he said. So my dad said, really? He said, so we could just get a 305 Chevy engine for it? My dad said, and the guy he worked with said, yeah, you can get a 305 Chevy engine. He told him what number the clutch plate was and everything, that he could get a Chevy clutch plate off of a Chevy truck. So my dad said, well, he said to me, he said, well, why don't we just buy an older vehicle that has a 305 Chevy engine in it? There's lots of them out there. All the vans, he said, that have the 305 Chevy. I think it was a 305. Anyway, it's a V8. So that's what we did. I started hunting in the newspaper for older vehicles that would have a 305 Chevy engine. And I found that the Durovans made by Chevy had a 305 engine in them. So I started hunting through the newspaper, and I saw this ad for a van. It says, runs great. It said, good engine, $450. I said, wow, that sounds pretty good. It was in Dartmouth, which was about a 30-minute drive away. So I called the guy up, from the newspaper, and I said, I understand you got a van for sale. He says, yeah, we got a van for sale. He said, $450. Yeah, $450. I said, well, when can I come out and see it? He said, well, you can come out this afternoon. So I drove into town, and I saw this blue van. There's a little blue van, dark blue. It had a few little rust holes in it and stuff, but I hopped inside it and drove it around the block and drove it up and down the street and stuff, and everything worked great in it. And it started so nice. And it runs so nice and so quiet and everything. And I said, I like this van. I was thinking to myself, I like this van. It's really nice. I liked it right off. I ever get in the vehicle and for some reason you just kind of like fit right into the seat just right, and everything feels right about it. You start the vehicle up and it starts easy. It just purrs, and it's just great. I loved it. said, hey, I love this van. So I bought the van, paid him $450, drove the van home, parked it in the driveway. And I got thinking, talking to my grandmother, I said, my grandmother, I love this van. I don't want my dad to take the engine out of it. I said, I want to keep this van. She said, well, he really wants the engine. He needs it for that tractor. I said, yeah. I said, I know. And she said, he sent you down special to get this van. So he's all excited. So I said, okay, well, let me think about it a little bit. So there's a nice restaurant in town. So me and my grandmother, we hopped in the vehicle and we drove into the restaurant. We were having dinner in there. My grandmother said, she said, you left the van back home in the driveway. She said, what's to stop your father from coming out and pulling the engine out of that van? I said, well, I never thought of that. Maybe he will. I said, I better call him up. So I got my phone, I got on the phone and I called up and got my mother on the phone. And I said, Mom, I said, is Pop home? She said, no, he's still at work. He's going to be home soon. I said, well, when he gets home and he sees that van there, don't let him start pulling that engine out of that van. She says, why? You bought the van for that, to give him the engine for the tractor. I said, I know, but I've decided to keep the van. She said, really? I said, yeah. I said, don't let him, whatever you do, don't let him chop that van up. I said, when he gets home, that's the first thing he's going to want to do. She said, yeah. She says, I know. She says, okay, I'll keep him from touching the van. I won't let him touch the van. I said, good, that's good. I said, I'll get him another one. I said, I'll find him another one. She said, okay. So, it did happen that way. I mean, my dad was disappointed. He says, this engine, he says, runs so good, and he hopped behind the wheel later that evening when he got home. And he says, I'd really like to have this engine, he says. I said, no, listen, Pop, I'll get you another engine. Honest to goodness, I'll get you another engine. Don't bother this one. He said, well, okay, he said. So everything was fine because a week later, I found another van, an old brown one that had the exact same engine in it. I didn't like the brown one at all. Driving it home, I think I had to pay $650 for the brown one. Driving it home, it was all rusty and it barely made it home. The brakes weren't working good. The engine wasn't quite as good as the first one I bought. Cost me a bit more money for it, but it was fine because it was the substitute. It was the one that was going to have the engine removed for his tractor. And so Pop was happy because he had his engine in the old brown van. But I had my van, so I was happy. And so I started working on the van. I found this gallon of mismatched paint, automotive paint from the paint store. Sold automotive paints. Back in those days, you could buy just what was called, it was a type of paint that I don't know if they even sell it anymore. It was a type of lacquer, that I was able to find a whole gallon of it. Back in those days, I think it was only like $30 for a gallon of paint. It was car paint. And I sprayed it on with a air compressor and a sprayer, right in the driveway. I had a nice sunny afternoon. Masked the van off, sanded it all down, and fixed a few little rust holes around the quarter panels, with some auto body putty, and sanded them off. And that was my original trade, was an auto body mechanic, so I was pretty good at it, Sanded her all down with 320, wet sanded her, let her dry, masked her all off, and give her a nice spray paint. She was blue, but I sprayed her a little bit lighter color, a solid blue color, a little bit lighter shade of blue. By gosh, she looked nice when I was done. She looked like a new van. She really, really looked nice. A nice shiny blue paint. And so I was really proud of that van. So that winter came. My grandmother, she wanted to go to Florida. So I said, well, let's take the van. Great working little vehicle, and we'll drive the van south to Florida. So that's what we did. I built this. The van had been insulated, already insulated. The guy that owned me before me had, back in those days, back like in the 1980s, 1990s, people used to customize vans. And it looks like he had tried to customize the van. He had insulated it and put panel wood on the inside and everything. But he hadn't really completed it. Had like a shag carpet on the floor, and so I put a seat in the back that folded out into a bed, and I had my tools down underneath the bed, and it opened up like the bed I built inside the back of it. And the van was all insulated, and so and my grandmother, we left, and we decided to drive south in it. So I had my bed set up in the back, and the passenger seat reclined, and she decided that she could just kind of sleep her way down south because that's what she liked to do. She just liked to recline in the seat and she'd fall asleep. Nice warm heater in the van, So I'd be driving south and she'd just lean the seat back and she'd fall asleep every time she could, So the miles were going by quick for her as we were driving through New Brunswick, heading toward Maine on our way south. So everything was good. And we drove all day, and the first day on our way south, we were heading to Florida. And everything was great the first day driving. We drove all the way just north of Boston. And we made it, I think, to a place called Portsmouth. So we had left Nova Scotia that morning. We drove all day and made it to Portsmouth, which is, I think, about 500 miles, more or less. Maybe 600, I don't know. And everything was fine. We got a motel for the night. Or a hotel. Or motel, whatever you want to call it. For the night, and I had to take all the boxes that she carried with her into the hotel because she didn't want anything stolen. She had about 15 boxes full of stuff and bags full of stuff and suitcases. And she used to love to travel heavy, my grandmother, So I had all this stuff I had to carry in. And every night, that's the routine. That's what it would be, is I'd have to carry all the stuff in because she didn't want anything stolen, and it took me about half an hour to carry all that stuff in. Every morning I'd have to carry it all back out again and put it in the van. But anyway, so we stopped the first night. So the second day we took off from Portsmouth and we were driving south around, I think it's 495 goes around Boston. And we weren't going to stay on 95 all the way down because it goes through New York. We were going to take like an alternate route that goes a little bit further to the west, goes around that whole big complex of Boston, New York, and all that. So we were making our way south, and we drove all day that day. It started to get to be nightfall, and it started to snow. Now, the interesting thing about all this is I hadn't lived in Canada very long. I was a Florida boy. I grew up in Florida, and I'd spent most of my life in Florida. I'd only been in Canada for a year or so, and I hadn't really learned how to drive in the snow. A lot of people told me, hey, you know what? There's secrets to driving in the snow. You got to hold the wheel this way or hold the wheel that way or whatever. Well, the real truth of the matter is there's no real secrets to driving in the snow. There's only one secret. The secret is to slow down. That's the big secret. And to keep the wheel nice and straight. Don't make any sudden turns or anything. But to slow down. That's the secret to driving in the snow. I didn't know the secret to driving in the snow back then. So it started snowing. And it snowed, and it snowed, and I was driving into this snow. Well, the speedometer on the van didn't work very good. It kept jumping. It was like it would jump up to like 60 and go back down to 30, and then jump back up to 60 and then go down to 30. And I figured the speed was somewhere in between there, someplace where the speedometer needle was jumping up this way and going back down that way and jumping up this way. It was just bouncing, the speedometer needle, but I figured the speed was somewhere in between, but I wasn't sure, with this bouncing needle on the speedometer. I guess it had a broken speedometer cable or something. Something was wrong with it at any rate, you know. Anyway, so we were driving along, and it was nighttime. It was starting to get nighttime. We'd driven all day, and we were getting down fairly far south. We were down in New York, I think, someplace, down around... by that time, we were down someplace around, I think in New York State maybe, or Pennsylvania, someplace like that. I think it was Pennsylvania we were in. About halfway to Florida. So we were getting pretty near 1,000 miles under our belt from when we had left, you know. And I think it's a 2,000-mile trip all the way down to where we were going. We were just about halfway. And this was the second day. We made about 500 or 600 miles the first day. We were making about 500 or 600 miles the second day. So nighttime was starting to come, and I was driving into the snow with these great big flakes. And I noticed the snow had started to pack down on the road and made like a white, hard packed, where the trucks have been driving over and everything. It made almost like an ice on the roads, you know. And I kept trying to make a little bit of time, you know what I mean? Like, I was only driving like 40 miles an hour, and I noticed a lot of people were passing me, so then I slowly increased it up to what I thought. If I looked between the jump and the needle, you know, I figured it was about 40 miles an hour, so I said, well, I'll creep it up to 45 miles an hour, because everybody's passing me. I should be okay if I keep the wheel nice and straight. So that's what I continued doing. Kept the wheel nice and straight. Creeped her up to 45 miles an hour, or 40, a little bit over, maybe 42 miles an hour, along in that area. Everything seemed fine. I was going along fine. I kept driving that way for about an hour, I guess, and then I said, well, everybody's still going a little bit faster than me, most people. It must be okay now. I'll just creep her up a little bit more, make a little bit better time. I'll creep her up to close to 50. So that's what I did. I was going nearly 50 miles an hour. Drove that way for another half hour or so, and then I said, well, just creep her up just a little bit over 50. So that's what I did. I creeped her up a little bit over 50 miles an hour. I think I was going about 52, 53 miles an hour. All of a sudden, it come out of nowhere. The old van went into a slide. And she started to slide sideways. My grandmother, she woke up. It woke her up real quick, that slide did. And she started screaming. She let out an awful screech. I turned the wheel the other way. And then the van slipped the other way and started to go into a full slide. And what she did the van spun right around, back into, and we were going backwards at about 40, 45 miles an hour down the road, completely backwards. And we were looking at the trucks behind us. Picture this in your mind. We're going backwards at about over 40 miles an hour, looking at trucks coming at us. And then she spun back around the right way again. And that thing spun around about 2 or 3 times before it finally come to a stop in the Meridian near an overpass. Slid right off the road, you know. And then the traffic was going by us in the other lane. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. And we were still faced back into. But we were off the road a little bit, just off the road far enough where we were safe. Come to a full stop. It's funny, after my grandmother let out the first scream, and then we started spinning, she didn't scream anymore. She was too frightened to scream. Her mouth was open, her eyes were wide, and she was just sitting there, spinning in the van. So we stopped. We come to a stop, and all the traffic was whooshing around us on the inside lane. Grandmother said to me, she said, you get off of this exit ramp, get off of this freeway. She said, I'm not driving with you one more mile on this freeway tonight. She said, it's too icy. She said, I'm not going no more. She said, no more. Pull right off here on this exit ramp. Make your way across when there's nothing coming and go off this exit ramp. And I'm not going one step further. I don't care, she said. I don't care. She said, I'll get a motel. I'll get something, she said. But I'm not going 1 inch further tonight. I said, okay, because I was scared too. I think I was white as a sheet by that time. So I did what she said. I very carefully waited until nothing was coming. Pulled the van out, got it off of the freeway, went up the traffic ramp there, and we got up around the ramp, and there was no hotels on that exit or anything. There was nothing there except just lone gas station sitting up on the hill. She said, well, go to that gas station, she said. I said, okay, we'll go there. So we drove up to the gas station, and there was lots of places to park there around the gas station. So there's nobody there. The gas station was closed. It was late that night. And by that time, it must have been like 1 o'clock in the morning or something. I parked the truck near the gas station. Turned the heater on inside the truck. Got it warm inside the truck. My grandmother leaned her seat back in the front up there and kind of pulled a blanket over top of her. And she leaned back and she went right to sleep. Now, I crawled in the back, in the bed I had in the back of the van. She was sleeping up front. And she started snoring away, and I crawled in and crawled under the blankets, and the temperature must have been around 32, 31, 32 degrees, because it wasn't that cold inside the van. The van was holding heat good because it had been insulated, Crawl underneath the blankets wasn't long. I fell asleep. Such a deep sleep, Slept right through the night. When I woke up, it was light outside, Everything was just coated with ice. I mean, it was, and we were sitting up this little bit of a hill, a little bit of a side on the side of the pumps there and everything. The gas station had opened up. They hadn't even noticed me. I was sitting there parking kind of way up to the side a little bit, and the pumps were like down little ways, down the hill, So I got behind the wheel and I said, boy, gosh, I'm hungry this morning. My grandmother, she woke up, she says, I said, how did you sleep? She said, I slept great, she said, and we were both feeling good. We both had a good night's sleep. So everything was just coated with ice. The pumps were coated with ice. The ground all around the gas station was coated with ice. And it was a little bit like, not a real steep hill, but just like a little bit of a hill. So I started to move the van down, and I said, I need gas anyway. I'm going to get some gas here. So I started to move the van down toward the pumps, And the van started to slide sideways. It slid right slowly down toward the pumps where I wanted to go. And it slid right up until it hit that round thing, that little round thing that goes around the pumps. The tires slid right up and it come right up against that, and it stopped. Just like I meant to do it. It was just like that movie, with Pee Wee Herman when we fell off the bicycle and he said, I meant to do that. Well, this was the same deal. It was almost like I'd meant to do it. I couldn't have done it any more perfectly to pull up to the pumps, But the problem is, my grandmother, she couldn't get out the door because her door was so close to the pumps on the passenger side that she couldn't get her door open. So I had to get out and go around. And it was hard to get the nozzle into the gas thing because it was so close to the pumps. I had to kind of squeeze it in there and everything. So I filled her up and paid the guy. And I kind of like slid the car out of this gas station down to the road. Well, they had salted the road, but they hadn't salted his place there. So I kind of had to slowly slide her down this way, slide her down that way to the road. I got her to the road. And then we took off, heading south, And everything was golden. But I always remember that night, that experience of spinning on the highway at 50 miles an hour and going back two, front two, and must have spun around 2 or 3 times, a full circle in the middle of the highway at nighttime. And it was, I'm going to tell you, it was so surreal that nighttime spinning around on the highway. It had this surreal feeling. Like the next morning, it was almost like, did that really happen? Were we really spinning around full 360-degree spins on the highway with trucks coming at us? I almost had to question myself. Did that really happen last night? But suffice to say, I was learning how to drive in the snow. And, it took me a little while. It took me a couple of years, but I did learn how to drive in the snow. One of the big things about driving in snow is you got to have the right kind of tires, first off. That's very important. And you've got to know your snow. There's different types of snow, There's the type of snow where it's slushy on the road, but and then there's the hard packed snow on the road, and then there's the ice on the road, and the black ice on the road. And you got to learn which ones are the most slippery and which ones aren't, and which ones you can get away with driving certain speeds. There's quite a lot to it, But I did learn it after a while. Now I'm pretty adept at driving in the snow. And one of the big things about driving in the snow is your speed, Anyway, listen, guys, thank you for listening to my story. And thanks, you guys, for all the support you do for all of my channels. And we'll catch you guys in the next one. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.